Take a look at this chart. It shows the workforce diversity for 10 major U.S. tech companies. These companies have been publishing diversity and inclusion reports for the past few years, and now they're leaving many to wonder why progress has been so slow.
The problem is ignorance. The problem is that this is the way the boys' club thinks.
It's a story that's been told again.
Google now has to take a really hard look at its diversity and inclusion programs.
And again.
This does not nearly meet the definition of building a racially diverse community.
And again.
Black women founders were raising approximately $36,000 compared to mostly white, mostly male failed startups, which were raising about $1.3 million.
And with very slow progress being made, the tech industry is still lacking in women, Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and other employees of color.
Silicon Valley specifically has long had this meritocracy idea. It's kind of a libertarian approach to talent where the cream rises to the top and we take who's ready, we take who's there.
And with the Black Lives Matter movement regaining a national spotlight, companies are re-upping their promises to diversify their workforces.
It's not going to be a one-year thing, it's going to be at least a 5-year thing. The companies that make that investment over the long term are going to be rewarded.
But why has it been such a slow process? Millions of dollars have been spent and years have been devoted to the issue, yet women still only make up an average of 32% of 10 major tech companies. Latinx employees make up only 8%, Black employees make up only 7%, and Indigenous employees make up about 0.5%. Data from these companies does not include employees with disabilities. Compared to the estimated U.S. population from the Census Bureau, these percentages do not represent the greater population.
We will all be better if we can actually have a diverse profile in tech. We're losing out, I think, globally because of this position that we've had.
We wanted to explore why it has been so challenging for big tech to diversify and what experts say they should be doing to solve the problem. According to one report, between 1999 and 2005, the combined number of Black employees at 10 major Silicon Valley companies dropped 16%, while the total workforce grew 16%. In the same time period, women in the workforce declined 4%.
A lot of it was how computers were marketed, and then who was told that they could actually code and do this. And it became, frankly, white men and white boys.
Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you.
And so, when computer science or any new field started to receive more research dollars and started to advance, we just weren't there at the earliest stages.
Now, more than a decade and several promises later, the numbers are still dismal.
We feel as though we're going backwards. The numbers haven't shifted over the years.
In 2014, a year after the acquittal of George Zimmerman and the subsequent founding of the Black Lives Matter movement, some of the big tech companies started reporting their workplace demographics and promised to increase diversity. According to the available data from 10 major U.S. tech companies, between 2014 and 2019, the percentage of women in these workforces went up less than 2%, and most of these were white women according to reports that specify gender and race. The gender data reported by these companies does not consider transgender or gender non-conforming employees, and only one of these 10 companies reported non-binary employee demographics. The percentage of Black employees went up less than 3%, Latinx employees went up about 1%, and Indigenous employees went down about 0.1%. The diversity data from these companies shows that Asian employees made up about 30% of these workforces in 2019, but doesn't break this large category down into its wide range of backgrounds and income levels. So why is tech like this?
If there's talent coming to you, and if there are visas available where you're able to take in that talent and eventually matriculate it into your workforce, maybe there's not that much of an incentive to develop domestic talent.
The tech industry has been one of the most lucrative in terms of high-quality jobs for years.
They pay twice the average salary, and by 2020, we could have up to 1 million unfilled tech jobs. And these are the jobs that can lift entire families up into the middle class.
So having an equitable approach to acquiring new employees makes sense. But diversity is more than just a benefit for the current or prospective employees at these tech companies.
Women, people of color often have different experiences, and with that can come diversity of thought. And it's shown that diversity of thought can really aid organizations.
The recent national attention on the Black Lives Matter movement brought the tech industry promises back into the light.
The industry has not been able to do this on its own without tremendous external pressure kind of saying, what's going on here? This shouldn't look like this.
History has shown that it takes more than dollar commitments, it takes more than press releases to actually translate into workforce changes. And what's unclear is whether the tech industry has the stamina to really push for the types of change in offering opportunity to a wider swath of the population than they have in the past.
You can trace the lack of diversity in tech all the way back to K through 12 programs.
If you went to a high school that had that robotics program, if you have an uncle that taught you how to code when you were 9, like, you're always going to win.
College programs are the next educational hurdle.
Companies are stuck on this model of what a great engineer looks like. They're historically targeting schools like Stanford, schools like MIT, where yes, they have great programs, but that's not the only source of great talent.
And then there's post-graduation.
What happens when our qualified women get to that door and are told that they don't have the skills or the requisite areas of study to be able to get that job?
Next is getting your foot in the door.
When a hiring manager has no Black folks in their network, there's just no possible way that folks from those backgrounds are even seeing the opportunities before they make a hire.
Once folks are hired, the challenge is keeping them safe and happy. According to a survey done by Girls Who Code, 52% of women polled had experienced harassment or discrimination or sexism at work, or knew a woman who had. And the number of Black employees in a technical position at Apple actually decreased between 2016 and 2018, meaning Black employees left at a higher rate than they were hired.
You need a corporate culture that's able to recognize when groups might be alienated or feel disconnected.
Part of retention is proper compensation. Pay discrepancies are still a problem at these companies. White and Asian men, again the data does not delineate specific Asian backgrounds, are still paid more than women. Black and Indigenous people and people of color. Women of color are paid even less, and Black women are paid the least.
Are companies actually thinking about pay equity and promotions, as well as work from home policies and family leave? And those are things that are huge right now, especially during a pandemic that's disproportionately affecting women. This spring, women lost 2 million more jobs than men did as a result of the pandemic, and yet we only make up 47% of the workforce.
By having a diverse leadership team, a company can prove that it can move qualified employees up the ladder, and those leaders can then promote and hire women and people of color. But for 10 major tech companies in the US, only 27% of leadership are women, 6% are Latinx, 3% are Black, and less than 0.5% are Indigenous, according to the most recent data available from each company.
Very often we've seen really troubling data around the people of color working in these organizations really being kind of converging in lower paying positions that don't have authority.
But a diverse leadership team does not necessarily mean an equitable work environment if the leadership team is working within the same system that puts white men above everyone else. There's a problem with the larger system.
We know what the problem is and we know how to solve it. We know where resources need to be allocated. But for some reason, the only people that know that, believe that, aren't the people with the checks, aren't the people that are actually making hiring decisions, aren't the people that actually have the power.
This most recent focus on diversification and inclusion has seen many high-profile donations from tech companies, among other initiatives. Facebook is donating $10 million to groups working on racial justice. Google has pledged $175 million, Apple $100 million. Nearly $1 billion has been pledged for education, training, and racial justice from tech companies.
But are you paying your Black employees equally, right? Are you promoting your Black employees equally? Are you doing the work within your company?
So what are some of these solutions and what are tech companies doing to implement them?
I think companies would have to take a deeper look at the kinds of resources and support that it takes at various local levels to enable the most talented students who are interested in the technology track.
We constantly have to think about keeping women in the pipeline and having them persist all the way through college and actually graduate.
To expand its talent pool, Apple's $100 million pledge includes a re-up of the company's work in education.
The effort will build on our long-standing work with historically Black colleges and universities, community colleges, STEM education, and underserved students and teachers.
But experts say companies can't just support these colleges, universities, and programs. They also have to hire from these programs into technical positions, the ones with the highest entry-level paychecks, and positions of power like managers.
The conversation always tended to go towards how do you assess this candidate? And I always pushed for measuring potential, and that increases the equity.
To create better hiring practices, Google said it will establish a new talent liaison within each product and functional area to mentor and advocate for the progression and retention of Googlers from underrepresented groups.
We're committed to doing better as a platform to center and amplify Black voices and perspectives. And we're working to ensure Black users, artists, and creators can share their stories and be protected from hateful, white supremacist, and bullying content.
But these companies have to be very specific about their focus on hiring, retention, and promotion.
I would ask them to both have people committed to changing the face of their workforce. I would ask for metrics to be committed around what this is going to look like.
Listening to Black folks, listening to especially women of color in these organizations who have been right all along, empowering them.
In an attempt to listen to its Black employees, Amazon is giving its Black Employee Network a grant to fund local organizations that support education and racial equality initiatives in communities across the country where employees live and work. But this does not address pay inequalities at the company. According to Glassdoor, Amazon warehouse employees make about $32,000 annually, while software engineers make about $132,000 annually. The last Equal Employment Opportunity Commission filing the company released to the public in 2016 showed that 88% of Black male employees at Amazon were laborers and helpers. For Black female employees, that number was 90%.
I would ask for leadership to reflect the kind of change that these companies want to see. So that would very much be, Black and brown women across the organization.
If we're historically underrepresented, then there probably isn't a chief product officer or a chief whatever officer that you can hire from another company because there's underrepresentation everywhere. But what you can do is promote folks within your organization and move them up the ranks.
To address this, Microsoft said it has goals and programs to improve representation in all roles and at all levels. We've heard similar statements from these companies before. When companies started divulging their workplace demographics, they made some promises that were not kept or resulted in disappointing progress. What's going to happen this time around?
If we just look historically, then no, most organizations will not make progress. But will some make progress? Have some organizations shown a lot of intelligence around this, not only willingness to change, but shown change? Yes, they have. Some large companies have. And so I think there's reason for optimism. And when certain visible companies make progress, that often has an impact on an industry as a whole.